In 2023, Pinal County received funding from the Arizona State Senate Bill 1722 to support the engineering and design of the East-West corridor. A key part of this process includes conducting an environmental assessment, or EA, and providing opportunities for the public to provide input on the project. The East-West corridor is a vital project that will enhance mobility and efficiency for area commuters. It will create a crucial connection between the communities of Maricopa, Casa Grande, and the Action Indian community, linking State Route 347 to Interstate 10. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Berwin Wilbrink. He's the project lead from Jacobs Engineering. Berwin?
Thank you, Celeste. So as we take you to the project, I'm going to use the slide that's in front of you. The project itself spans 20 miles. Our formal study starts at Porter Road to Interstate 10, but the corridor goes all the way from 347 to I-10. We're proposing a parkway, parallel two-lane road adjacent to the existing road for 2 lanes in each direction, ultimately giving us a 4-lane facility. The parkway concept has a divided median roadway that limits left turn movements. Our goal with the parkway is to provide predominance to the east-west movement, making it as efficient as possible to get in both directions, to get either to I-10 or 347. The purpose and need for the project is to provide a high-capacity east-west connection between Maricopa and I-10. To accommodate the future growth of not only Maricopa, but the Action community as well as Casa Grande, providing community continuity between all the folks in this corridor, to improve travel dependability. Sometimes we have some challenges with some of the routes to get out of here and get to Phoenix, including 347. This will enhance that and better accommodate future travel markets. So when we start with this corridor presentation, how do we get this idea started? Might be one of your questions. And how are we hoping, or what are we hoping to accomplish? The goal, as we noted before, is to provide an efficient east-west facility between 347 and I-10. A long time ago, starting back in beyond 2000, the county completed its regionally significant route study and has updated in years since, along with other studies that ADOT has performed, that has given us traffic insights as to what kind of improvements, what kind of a corridor for transportation needs to exist between 347 and Interstate 10. So the need for this high efficiency corridor has been identified not only by these studies, but it's also included in the general plans of Maricopa and Casa Grande. In 2010 through 2012, the study team developed a design concept report that looked at several alternatives connecting between I-10 and 347. On the screen before you, you can see some of the alternatives that we considered. As you can imagine, going through some of the developed lands on the far west, going through Maricopa, would be difficult with all those developments. To make the route too far to the south, like Alternative 7, doesn't give the benefits to Maricopa. And so there's a pro and con for all of the various alternatives that we considered, but we went through a vetting process with our stakeholders, our agency partners, as well as the public through a couple of public meetings to come up with the corridor that we ultimately selected. Some of the screening criteria that was used to help eliminate those alternatives, including available right-of-way, where we could incorporate access control, what the planned developments are in the area, the best reuse of existing facilities, making it fit within the topography, a host of environmental elements that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, working with the Action community to get approval, and then certainly to provide a relief to the traffic if 347 should have some challenges. Nancy's going to go through some of the environmental elements. We've got a list of them here that were all considered. She's going to go through the environmental elements a little bit more in detail a little bit later in this presentation. Ultimately, we came to a recommendation to build the corridor between 347 and I-10 following the dark blue line. Portions of it are just south of Farrell Road, initially through Maricopa. Then it follows the MCGH, the Maricopa Casa Grande Highway, until it comes up to the alignment of Val Vista, and then basically follows Val Vista for the balance of the corridor till it comes to a new intersection with I-10. The type of improvement that we're building is, or we would propose, I should say, is to have an Arizona Parkway. The Arizona Parkway has been in use in other states for over 40 years. You can kind of see a picture of an example on our right. It has a median to provide some access control in the middle. It predominantly has east-west movements going through. So it has near freeway volumes at a lower speed. Our speed would be between 45 and 50, but a significant increase over a normal arterial or a normal city street. So the context sensitive means trying to fit in with the surrounding terrain and the environment. And it also has less potential for crashes. We have some safety information coming up. The way the parkway works is instead of having at every intersection the opportunity to turn left and delaying the east-west movement, most of the signals will operate in either a north-south and east-west movement, two phases. And so if you wish to make a right turn, the right turn works on the through movement. If you wish to make a left turn, you'll actually make a right turn initially and then come to the median crossover and turn left and continue on your direction as if you had made a left turn. So those median crossovers are provided on each side of the intersection for you to make the left and or U-turn. And this will help basically allow for more green time on the east-west movement and less red time. Michael, I see you got your hand raised. We're going to do all our questions at the end of the presentation. So don't forget your question, but we're going to keep on running through just to get through the bulk of the meeting. Okay. Some of the benefits associated with the type of parkway that we're proposing, all identified by federal highways, significant reduction in overall crashes, 32% fewer injuries, 37% fewer rear end crashes, and an overall reduction in crashes at the major intersections, especially by eliminating those left turn lanes. So it certainly increases the capacity of the corridor without increasing the speed and improves the safety. Many benefits for this type of a solution. So before we turn it over to the environmental details, just want to take you on kind of a quick drive-through of the corridor. As we mentioned, these improvements are proposed to go between 347 and I-10. A portion of it is already built in Maricopa, so you can kind of see what things could possibly look like by going on that section. The portion is done between 347 and Porter Road. The proposal here on this project is to continue moving from Porter Road, heading towards MCGH. With the lines that we've got shown here, you can see that the proposed improvements would go over the Santa Rosa Wash and then head over the Maricopa Casa Grande Highway, as well as the Union Pacific Railroad, and then turn and veer back to the MCGH Highway. We've been working with the developers to incorporate this alignment in their development plans. It would have a new bridge that spans over both MCGH and the Union Pacific Railroad, very similar to the SR 347 bridge that's there already. I might note on the previous slide, White and Parker would no longer have a crossing of the railroad with the bridge crossing that we're putting in. So sorry about that, Brock. All right, next slide. So as we continue down the MCGH, The improvements in this particular area, we have between the Santa Cruz Wash and White and Parker, a lot of irrigation fields to the north, along with wells. And so we're restricted with some of our right of way to not take those wells as they might be used for water in the future. We still have a 4-lane section, 2 lanes in each direction, just has a narrower median. As we approach the Santa Cruz Wash, we then go through the area that has the development section for the industrial area for the Auction community. We'll be providing, we propose to provide access points to the existing roads that are here. There's also an existing crossing of the railroad at Anderson. That at-grade crossing will continue to be there. One of the things you see on this slide is also a regional drainage channel. Along with these improvements come a significant amount of flood control improvements. In this particular channel, it will divert the water that would otherwise go to the airport and to the community below it and have to be a wider channel next to the MCGH. As a result, we're diverting that water and connecting with the channel that would ultimately still discharge into the Santa Cruz, but providing better flood control protection. As we come down to the MCGH where it crosses Val Vista Road and the Parkway, we are still working with Casa Grande as to how the particular intersection and the future development will work in this area. You can see the existing road is there. We are looking at extending Val Vista along the section line and getting closer to the MCGH highway. How that intersection is going to look like and what it's going to look like, we're still in development. We hope to get that resolved soon. As we continue down Val Vista Road, it'll continue as a 4-lane facility. Obviously, with no development initially, it'll just be nice, clear sailing and getting through. It'll have provisions and designs for future intersections to accommodate this. And then one of the main improvements is more drainage enhancements, putting in culverts under the highway to make it an all-weather road, eliminating a lot of the dip crossings. As we come to Burris and in between Pinal Avenue, we have a lot of existing developments. Many of you might be residents in this particular area. We need to fit the parkway within the existing right-of-way that's available. We're still making left turn restrictions and providing right-in, right-out opportunities, especially lining up with the subdivisions and the streets to make it as accessible as we possibly can. After we pass through Scott Drive, you'll see that the parkway gets a little bit wider. That's to allow for the left turns and the U-turns that are available with the parkway. There wouldn't be any of those U-turns through the short 2-mile stretch between Burris and Scott Drive. As we kind of finish the alignment for the corridor, as we pass Pinal Avenue, you'll still have the opportunity, of course, to head north on Pinal and south. As the parkway continues to the west, or excuse me, the east, we'll be making adjustments to avoid impacts to the police station and the mobile home park where it gets a little bit narrower through here. We have a major drainage channel that we have to take into account. After we get to Treckle Road and beyond, it returns back to its wider parkway concept. One of the things that's noticeable as we approach I-10 is we'll be building a new interchange on I-10. There's an existing bridge, a 2-lane bridge over the freeway today. We'll be building a new parallel bridge to the south to accommodate a full interchange. This kind of interchange type is called a diverging diamond. It has the traffic crossing at the intersections to allow us to have basically free-flowing left turn movements onto I-10 as you're heading from Maricopa onto the freeway and having the most efficient means of going from the west to head north. Same is true to head south. It's fully directional. It's just that it gives a higher performance, higher preference to the left turn movements. So a very efficient way of getting the traffic in the direction that you'll ultimately want to be heading. We will have to make an adjustment to Avalon to make it tie in a little bit to the east. But then that would be the end of our improvements with the Parkway corridor. So that's a quick run through of what we're proposing. I'm going to turn it over to Nancy. She's going to go through a lot of the environmental details. Nancy?
Thanks, Berwin. So as mentioned earlier, at this time we are initiating the environmental study of the proposed project in compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, or NEPA. The intent of this act is to solicit public input and disclose potential impacts to the public and disclose the impacts to the public and to inform decision making. The process consists of obtaining input from the public and agencies, identifying impacts and disclosing them in an environmental assessment, or EA, that will be available for public review and comment, and then finalizing the EA and preparing a decision document. In the preparation of the environmental assessment, we'll review a lot of different resources and then identify the impacts that may result from implementing this project. We consider physical resources as well as social and economic resources in the study area. We're conducting cultural resources studies, assessing impacts to habitat, wildlife species, and common wildlife, and species that are protected by the Endangered Species Act, as well as their movement patterns. How this project would affect washes, floodplains, air quality, utilities, how much noise would potentially affect receivers in the surrounding area, and so on throughout this. On the social side, we're looking at how this project would affect land use, community cohesion and character, access, and population and employment, and other economic considerations. Under NEPA, we look at the direct impacts, such as the removal of vegetation or changes to a wash crossing where the road would be constructed, as well as indirect impacts, which are something that would happen either further from the project or later in time. We also consider past, present, and reasonably foreseeable impacts, as well as impacts in combination with other activities that are going on in the area for their cumulative effect. All this information is summarized in the environmental assessment that we'll be preparing. Obtaining public and agency input is a key part of the NEPA process. And during the development of the design concept report, we conducted several meetings to obtain public and agency input and identify issues to help frame the alternative development that we previously discussed. Subsequently, the study team provided informational updates to share the alternatives that were received and to discuss the alternatives and received comments on those alternatives. These comments were used in determining the design concept report's recommended alternative. At this time, we're reintroducing the project to refresh this information for those present and look back at during the original study and to catch new participants up if they weren't here at the previous time. In addition, we are updating our data and obtaining new input from participants. Based on the feedback we are receiving at this meeting and information from previous scoping efforts, we'll identify which are the key issues for the environmental studies. During the NEPA process, outreach will consist of this meeting, ongoing coordination with tribes, agencies, website updates, press releases and newspaper advertisements. And when the draft environmental assessment is released, there will be a 30-day comment period during which we'll hold a public hearing. So Brock.
All right, thank you, Berwin and Nancy, for more information on the project. Of course, tonight's meeting isn't it. We do have the project website as a resource. You can visit the project website at the link provided on the slide. We're also going to be putting the link in the chat for you as well. As we discussed prior in the presentation, comments are really critical to this process. Your input is extremely important. And we appreciate you taking the time to learn more about the project this evening and provide us your feedback either tonight or through other forms through March 2nd. As mentioned, Pinal County is accepting comments on the alternatives through March 2nd in the following ways. So through tonight's meeting and our discussion tonight, you can also provide the information on the online survey with the link here. That'll also be provided in the chat. You can also scan the QR code to go directly to that survey. You can submit your comments via email to info-east/west corridor at barnhartco.com. We can also take your comments by phone at 623-825-3444, or you can mail your comments to East-West Corridor 3200 North 39th Street, Unit 25, Phoenix, Arizona 85018. Now we'll begin the question and answer portion of the meeting. Thanks for your patience as we went through the presentation. We will begin by addressing the pre-submitted questions provided through the meeting registration link, followed by raised hand questions. Raise hand if you are joining the meeting online. You can raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. When you raise your hand, the presenter will unmute. We will go ahead and unmute you, and we'll call on your name, and you can go ahead and speak your question. We do ask you to please limit verbal questions to no more than 30 seconds. We ask that you limit yourself to one question until others have had an opportunity to ask their question. Also, Q&A wise, if you are participating on an online meeting, you can also submit a written question using the QA function. If you have a comment instead of a question, please feel free to enter your comment in the chat. If we are not available to answer your question or comment this evening, we are limited with some time tonight. We'll try to do our best to get through everything. The comments or questions that you provide through the chat, they'll be addressed in the meeting summary, which will be posted to the project website. All right, so I want to emphasize here that these questions were pre-submitted questions as a part of the registration. You may recall being asked if you do have a question that you'd like to submit to the team prior to the meeting. I do want to let you know that these are just a handful that we decided to take out because they were fairly global in nature. They weren't very specific, and we just wanted to kind of address some of the ones that were more common themes. So again, I do want to reiterate that these weren't all the questions we received. We have put all the questions received so far in a comment matrix. So again, if we can't get to those this evening, we will be addressing those comments through our public meeting summary to ensure that we do answer your questions. And again, you have those various ways to answer questions or to provide comments and continue to ask questions through March 2nd based on the previous slide. So we're going to go ahead and get through these, I believe, 7 questions here first, and then we'll go ahead and take the raised hands questions, and then we'll try to get to some of the questions that are in the chat after that. So let's go ahead and I'll read the first question, and then I'll have the team address that question. So has anyone looked at developing Seed Farm Road or other roads in the area?
With respect to the previous study that was performed, as we showed you before on a slide, there were several alternatives we did consider. Seed Farm Road is quite a ways to the north, as a matter of fact, north of the knoll, and kind of outside of our study range. To provide a route that connects Maricopa to I-10 at that alignment, very beneficial, not very beneficial for those folks in Casa Grande. So our limits are really between 347 and I-10, but located on the corridor south of that mountain, so it could benefit from all those communities. That's really the focus of where our study corridor is, so that's why Seed Farm wasn't considered. But there's a host of alternatives. The 11 that we had shown on the previous slide was kind of a bundling of the major ones. Quite a few were considered.
All right, thank you, Berwin. Moving on to the next question, the pre-submitted question is, what is the time frame for the project?
I can take that one, Brock. The time frame that we have in place is only for this completed design project, which is slated for January of 2026. With that, I can answer this second bullet about the funding source for construction. So the completed design, provides us a path for the future construction and those opportunities for grants, and state and federal grants for us to be able to fund the $355 million we need to construct this 20-mile corridor. I think it's important also to mention, just so folks are aware, that we're going to upload this presentation to that website link that you see in the chat so that you can be able to go back and look at those alternatives in a little more detail and provide those public comments.
Excellent. Thank you, Celeste. Moving on to the next question. Has there been a study completed to determine the number of people that travel south for employment every day?
There hasn't been a study as far as this corridor is concerned, specifically looking at origin destination studies between Phoenix and Casa Grande and Maricopa as to where the traveling public is going for employment. What we're using is existing traffic studies and models that show where the cars have historically gone, where historically the travel motions are, and then where the development and the rest of the travel needs are. They do take into account where people are going for work. They do take into account what the travel movements are and what the projected travel movements are. So those are worked out with Pinal County, with MAG, with the cities. All of them have those studies, and that all went into how we came up with the original corridors and looked at the sizing of these movements to make certain it could accommodate the projected travel on this corridor.
Excellent. Thank you, Berwin. On to the next question. What will the posted speed limit be?
The speed for the parkway would be between 45 and 50. In some areas where we have less development, we can open it up to 50. Where we get a little bit more congested and tighter, it'll be down to 45.
All right. And also with the proposed recommendation, will there be traffic signals installed by residential developments?
With respect to the traffic signals, we want to keep them down to a minimum, but obviously where they're necessary, they'll be installed. So major intersections like Pinal that already have them, those will be signalized. In other locations, we may be putting in infrastructure to make provisions for future signals when the traffic movements warrant them. Certainly, if we get in and build our improvements and the developers come later, then the developers would be installing those signals. So we'll work together with the developers as part of their development plans to incorporate those signals.
All right. And our final pre-submitted question before we move on to raised hand questions is, will there be a concrete divider or physical barrier between the 4 lanes like SR 347? And that might need some clarification as well, Berman.
Yes, there will be a physical barrier, but not a concrete raised median divider like a barrier would be. What we would have is we would have raised curb and perhaps landscaping or something in between on the curb, but we will be providing a means of restricting left turns and driving across the median. But when I hear a concrete divider, I get the vision of a 3-foot tall concrete divider. We're not talking about something like that. We're talking about curb, like you would see on many arterials as a means of controlling access.
Excellent. Thanks, Berwin. And that concludes our pre-submitted questions. We're going to go ahead and Amanda, can you identify any raised hands that we may have? And just go ahead and once you identify them, just call on that participant and we'll unmute them and allow them to ask the team a question.
Bob Marsh, we're going to start with you. You should be unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, first I want to thank you for your hard work on this. This is a great design. I drive it a couple times a month to get to Florence. For the past 250 years in this country, we've designed roads to get to the county seat. Back in New England, it was by walking or horseback. By the time we got out west, it was 30 miles or 40 miles. But I'm wondering if you can extend this vision to give Maricopa's access to the county seat. I know it gets us to I-10, but going further east, could we connect it up to the roadways that go into Florence?
Celeste, you want to take a crack at that first?
Well, Berwin, I think that surely there's opportunities to get further east, and ultimately, I would personally love a corridor that would get me from Casa Grande to Florence because that's where I'm at today. But I don't think that we have something particularly in the works yet that's made it to this level of design that will get that far. We certainly have our regional routes of significance that will provide some opportunities that cross through some of those areas within the city of Casa Grande and the city of Coolidge and the town of Florence that will eventually reach us over here in the county seat. But I too would love that to happen. It's just not, it's in, our transportation master plan, but it isn't funded for anything further than that at this point.
Celeste has talked about the transportation master plans. The county has posted on its website the regionally significant routes study. We refer to it as the RISRAM. But when you look at that, it shows some of the major corridors and improvements throughout Pinal County. And then the same thing is true with Casa Grande and Maricopa. Their general plans show where future corridor improvements will be included. This particular one is just going between 347 and I-10. But there are other improvements that are going on, the extension of Cortson and other major highways going through headed towards Florence are in the plans. They're just, as she said, not funded, but they're looking into them.
All right. Thanks, Berwin and Celeste, for addressing that. Bob, good question. Amanda, can you identify the next participant and go ahead and call on them and unmute?
Bay, go ahead.
Thank you. It's a two-part question. Are there more detailed maps available showing the corridor? What you've posted is an overview, but does not show impact into the existing residential communities that this will pass through, how wide of an impact it will make into those communities. And then the second part of the question, what will be done to mitigate to the existing residences the impact of road noise and diminished property values due to adjoining a freeway now?
Okay, B, with respect to your question, first part, more detailed, I think that, obviously we had to kind of show the corridor in a quicker view for the meeting tonight. You can certainly download the presentation and zoom in to some of our exhibits, especially on the last couple of slides that we had shown. They will show you in greater detail some of the specifics associated with the improvements, especially if you're in that residential area on either side of Val Vista. It'll show what the right-of-way is proposed. The proposed right-of-way through that area, assuming that's the area you're talking about, where there's existing right-of-way and homes adjacent to it, for the most part, we're holding to that right-of-way line. Where we're doing expansion is between Scott and the Pinal. And in there where we don't have development to the south, that's where we're widening and providing the full parkway. In the area in between the developments where we have existing walls and constraints, we will fit the 4 lanes in there. Like I said before, there will be left turn restrictions. That would be the same whether we build a parkway or a major arterial. And so those types of restrictions are going to be incorporated simply because as we move from a rural 2-lane road to a more developed road, we use access management to try and keep the safety and the capacity to its best. In terms of your questions, in terms of diminished value, diminished depends a lot in the eye of the beholder. In some cases, this is a more efficient route. It'll get you to your locations faster. So there are some benefits. You use the term freeway. It's not a freeway. It's a parkway. And so with lower speeds, less road noise than you would have with a freeway. 45 miles per hour is the same speed that we would use on a major arterial. So we're keeping it like a major arterial. Granted, for those of you that are saying, hey, this is just a 2-lane rural road today, I didn't know it was going to be a 5-lane road, or a 4-lane parkway. Well, all of the city plans and the county plans had provisions for expansion in the future. We're just simply getting to the time where that's future expansion is now necessary. And so that's why it's being looked at and designed and implemented. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Berwin, and thank you, B. Good question. Amanda, can you identify the next participant?
Anthony Smith, go ahead.
Are you talking, Anthony?
Anthony, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Okay, start again. I think the answer is no, but will the design include a grade separation at the traffic intersection with Pinal Avenue? And I think the answer is no. And if so, will you do a traffic study to identify the peak hour estimates, traffic estimates?
Okay, sure. One of the elements, of course, with a study and an improvement like this is a pretty thorough traffic study that looks at what the traffic's going to be doing, what it has done in the past, and what the models are for the future. You're correct. We are not looking at doing a grade separation at Pinal, but because Pinal is such an important regional route in its own right, left turns will be allowed at Pinal. We will be putting a signal there. You'll still have the opportunity to efficiently go north or south as you come from the east or west at that particular location. We believe that the most efficient use for you to get ultimately to the valley would be to stay on Val Vista and go to the Val Vista interchange. But all of those movements are being addressed for not only the opening year traffic, but we look at estimating traffic 20 to 25 years into the future. So that's how the design is built up.
All right. Thank you, Berwin. Thank you, Anthony, for the question. Amanda, can you identify another participant if we do have another hand up?
Nancy Smith, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Nancy Smith. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I don't have a question. I've been looking at this east-west corridor for many, many years. I completely feel like I understand it and almost to some degree a part of it. But I want to invite anyone on the call to come down to the City of Maricopa portion that has been completed to see how well it operates and how smoothly it operates with actually very little noise and very little issues at all. And our portion actually is up against some residential as well. Not quite as close as the segment that was previously discussed, but we haven't had any complaints regarding the Sonoran Desert Parkway, which is what we call our part of the east-west corridor. This section, I just want to be on record, this section is going to be so highly important. This whole road, actually, from 347 all the way to I-10, is going to be so highly important because of the fact that, as you know, the city of Casa Grande continues to add industrial areas. And the city of Maricopa, as you may or may not know, just added 680 acres of industrial park, business park, opportunities for developers right on the Maricopa Casa Grande Highway. And this will be really important for those who are employed in all of these industries to be able to move on this east-west corridor with ease and without any problem. It also provides, as you mentioned before, another exit for those in the city of Maricopa to be able to get in and out of the city of Maricopa. And I feel like that's extremely important for emergency purposes as well. All of our cities have emergency exit plans, and this parkway will be an excellent opportunity for moving traffic quickly in the case of an emergency. And again, with the railroad tracks right close to this area, it becomes important for the city of Maricopa and the city of Casa Grande for those reasons as well. But it's a much needed, and we've been waiting for it for a long time. So I just want to go on record saying I highly support this road. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nancy, for the comment. Amanda, is there anybody else that has a hand raised? Looks like 8 of them. Is there anybody we can select here?
Well, someone just, something changed. So, Brian, go ahead and unmute yourself. Brian Hartman.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Do you have any idea what the Anderson Road and Maricopa CG Highway intersection will look like?
Oops, I'm sorry, I clicked too many times on the camera. Anderson Road and the MCGH, it will continue to be like the intersection. It'll allow the improvements to the north as it does today. I believe that is the intersection that has the existing railroad crossing to the south. And so what we'll be doing, because it's on such a skew, we do provide for all of the traffic movements and signals at that location to help facilitate the traffic movements. It'll be a 4-lane facility, a right turn lane to go across the railroad tracks, a left turn lane going into Anderson, and then the opportunity from Anderson to go left or right. It'll create a break in the traffic with the signals.
All right. Thanks, Berwin. Thank you, Brian, for the question. Amanda, can we select the next participant?
Walter, can you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So my question is going to be for just east of Anderson with those residential areas. I overheard you say that you guys are going to go right up to the right-of-way fence. I didn't see any of the proposed alternative routes for potentially taking any of that property. I reside in that property, so I would just like to know that I'm still safe. I don't care about having a freeway behind me. This is, how do you say? This is my home, so I love it here, and I'm okay with the road expansion. I know we need it.
Okay, with the homes that are located between adjacent to Anderson, that whole strip, we'll still be building a drainage channel that has to convey the stormwater for the larger storm events. So we're trying to keep, right now you've got just the 2-lane roadway. We're going to be putting a 4-lane roadway and a drainage channel. There's a potential for some widening along the backside of your right of way along your property. Right now we're showing that that widening. I don't remember exactly what the width is, but it's the width of a channel. And so we can get you a drawing that shows some of the details a little bit closer, somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 feet. It'd be on the higher end in terms of what we're looking at. Only way we can do that is to put a channel through there to make the provisions for both the traffic and the drainage improvements.
All right. Thank you, Berwin. Thank you, Walter, for the question. Amanda, can we select our next participant?
Bill Robertson, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to mirror what Mayor Smith said. This is an important project for the city of Maricopa. The eastern boundaries of the city of Maricopa is propped up right now for 30,000 residents in the next 10 years or so. So this will be a critical parkway to access the valley, which will actually be shorter for the folks living in eastern Maricopa to use this parkway rather than the 347. Many of us in Maricopa already use the Val Vista alignment when things go to heck on 347. It adds about 10 minutes or about 10 12-mile travel distance to the valley, but when 347 is closed for 2 or 3 hours, it becomes a vital link to the rest of the world. And yes, the city of Maricopa has a lot of skin in the game. $30 million of a 3-mile section of the Sonoran Desert Parkway actually kicked off this project in cooperation with our neighbors, the Ak-Chin Indian community. So I just want to support the project. I really don't have a question. My question was about the timeline. I realize that right now your timeline has to be reserved for the study, but is there any way you can, we know these projects sometimes take 10, 15, or 20 years. If there's any way if the stars align perfectly and this thing could kick off sooner, that would be great. Lots of things happening in the fastest growing city in the Western United States. That's the city of Maricopa. Thank you very much.
Hey, Bill, thank you so much for your comment. I will add that with respect to with the funding and the schedule, as Celeste pointed out earlier, right now the design is funded. We are moving forward with looking at what the potential improvements could be, what that footprint would be, so that when we can, when this environmental process is done, it'll allow us to go chase grants, other funding opportunities, put things onto a solid program as to when we can start construction. So we're taking that first step. And once we clear the environmental process, that really helps us to go forward with getting the right of way and getting the funds for the rest of the project. So we don't have an answer, but we're making provisions so that we can try and get those funding in place. And then once it is in place, move to construction as soon as possible.
All right. Thanks, Berwin. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate your comment. Amanda, do we have any other hands up?
Ron, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation you guys gave. I particularly liked all the opening information on all the safety impacts that this road can bring. One question that I have, and I know it's going to be a hard question to answer, but you've presented an excellent case of why this should be done, and I think a lot of the speakers have talked about its importance. But what are the odds? Are you guys confident that this will eventually get done, or is this a long shot? I'm not that familiar with how hard or easy it is to get funding. You certainly have presented a compelling case about this. Seems like a no-brainer that we should absolutely get it done, especially given the safety impacts. So I just love like your subjective opinion on what do you think the odds are?
I think, federal grants are very much an opportunity at this point. Transportation infrastructure in the community all the way up to the legislative DC level is important. And I think the fact that the project connects communities, provides alternatives, improves safety, those are all important ways that highlight positive impacts to the project and resonate with, your elected officials and your legislators at those levels that decide on how that funding is appropriated. So I think it makes a very compelling case and a very compelling grant application when we do apply for those. So I think likelihood is probably better now that we'll have this document in place come next year. So I think it's very viable. It's very viable.
All right. Thanks, Celeste. And also Ron for your comments and question. We're coming up on about 10 minutes left. We want to try to get through as much as we can this evening. Again, we do have some limitations, so let's continue to take some raised hands questions if we have them. I do want to say that if we do happen to come to a halt this evening, that your questions, if they are in the chat, they are going to be documented as a part of the public record, and we will be addressing those as a part of the public involvement summary. So not to say we're cutting you off yet, but let's move on to raised hands. I just wanted to give about a 10-minute warning, and we'll try to go as long as we can here. Amanda, next participant.
EI, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Eva. Can you hear me?
Great, yes.
So why was the community not able to vote on which route to choose? Because I live in the Saddleback community and I'm watching your routes and I noticed that you guys avoided a lot of businesses and opted out to go through residential. On the Casa Grande Highway, why wasn't it chose to be on the other side of the railroad instead up by the residential? I'm up by Trading Post, so I'm also part of that roadway, and it's going to affect me and my animals. So I want to know why wasn't the other option to be built on the other side of the railroad?
With respect to when we did the study initially and looked at alternatives in 2010 to 2012, we did have several public meetings that
My
shared.
company was better than everybody's.
And I understand if you attended them,
Yes.
but when we looked at the various alternatives, for example, the idea of putting the corridor
I said you
on the
avoided
south side.
businesses, but you didn't avoid residential.
Well, but if you, for example, you ask, can we put it on the other side of the railroad? All of the corridor, all the transportation studies have the improvements located to the north side. That's where the railroad that's where the existing corridor is. That's where the existing access points are. And one of the things we cannot do is with the UPRR, we cannot add any more crossings of the railroad. The only types of crossings that we can do for Union Pacific is if we improve it, we have to do a grade separation. That's why at White and Parker, we're building a skewed intersection over the top, but we have to take that on a bridge and then take the existing crossing off. As we come to the south and as we go on Val Vista, as we look through the community of Casa Grande, we did look at corridors to the north and south of Val Vista. And the corridor for Val Vista worked the best in terms of future development, as well as what we could fit the existing corridor in and who it would benefit the most. It does access all the subdivisions well. It does provide access to the future developments north of the airport, and it does provide the best connection to I-10. So when we add all of those benefits up, that's how the corridor was essentially defined. Not only does this study support that alignment, but it's part of the ultimate plans that are shown by the county and the ultimate transportation plan by the city of Casa Grande. So we're consistent with what the designs and the desires are for their master plans in the future as well. So that's how the corridor got developed.
All right. Thank you, Berwin, and thanks for the question. I know, again, we're coming up on time, so we want to get to some additional questions. Amanda, is there additional participants that have a raised hand?
Tom Weiss, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I have a double question. Wondered about the cross-section of the proposed road. Does it change throughout the alignment? And the second part of the question is, does that allow for 6-lane improvement in the future as development occurs along the road? Thank you.
Tom's talking technical. We love to get into technical, Tom. But with respect to the cross section of the roadway, we're making provisions for a 4-lane facility, which is greater than what we need in the foreseeable future, at least in terms of what our traffic models can give us. To go to a 6-lane facility with the right-of-way that we have, especially with the railroad constraints and the drainage constraints, we don't see this going ever to a 6-lane facility, even though general parkways would normally make the provision to go to a wider facility. We see that the 4-lane will meet the needs for quite some period of time, especially with the efficiency that the parkway provides with the reduced signals and the right-in, right-out access. And I'm sorry, there was your question was on the typical section, so I think I've answered that. Oh, and it changes. Yes, it does. Our right-of-way capability is not the same through the entire corridor because some areas obviously are constrained with existing development. Rather than take the homes, we've shown to neck down the 4 lanes and have a smaller median and not provide the left turn movements as opposed to taking the homes and making the right-of-way larger. The good news is that it still works well because those areas are very short in distance, mile to a mile and a half. we can then spread the concept out to the wider sections adjacent to those properties.
All right. Thank you, Berwin, and thank you, Tom, for the question. Amanda, do we have any other raised hands?
David Travis, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I appreciate all the work and the very kind opportunity you've given everybody to comment. And I apologize, I wasn't on right away. I'm a person that lives in Casa Grande, on very near Val Vista, and I just, I understand the concepts and they make a lot of sense from a flow point of view. But we move a problem from one area to another, and we already see that the 347, whenever there's any hiccup, it overloads the Casa Grande on-ramp to I-10 tremendously, and then it also overloads I-10 and it overloads the roads going through the reservation. So I'm not sure if you covered that, but that's already happening today without this extra traffic. So my question is, you probably looked at this, but I mean, to combine, push the problem to Casa Grande from Maricopa, to me, it makes more sense to just keep adding lanes to 347, and try to keep those separate, because the I-10 can't handle it right now. And even with the extra lane, I'm not sure it can handle it if you funnel more this direction. Thank you.
Great question, David. One of the things we're here to talk about specifically this east-west corridor along between 347 and I-10. What's not being discussed tonight, but is certainly being planned, is ADOT has a lot of improvements that are going on in addition. For example, there's major improvements proposed to the 347 corridor. Changes to the intersections, expansion of the corridor, even a new interchange located at I-10 to make it more efficient on the left turns into Phoenix. ADOT is also working with the Gila River community to widen the balance of I-10 to a 6-lane facility, making it 6 lanes all the way from Phoenix into Tucson. We combine those capacity improvements on I-10 with the capacity improvements on 347, and then add to it when there should be a problem on this particular corridor. I think the region as a whole will benefit.
All right. Thank you, Berwin. And again, thank you, David, for your question. Amanda, do we have any additional raised hands?
Christine, you should be able to unmute yourself. Are you able to unmute yourself? We'll move on. We'll give you a chance to try to figure that out and come back to you. Alan and Tandy, can you unmute yourself? We'll let you try to work on that while we go to Angela Weddle. Can you unmute yourself?
Unmute.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, actually, this is Randy on Angela's phone. We're residents of Casa Grande and live north of Val Vista to the west of Scott Drive. And I have more of a comment as opposed to a question. It was asked earlier about noise abatement or if there's going to be anything done about noise. I think it's extremely naive to think that there's not going to be a very significant increase in noise by going to 4 lanes. I mean, it's 2 lanes now and it's a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit now, and we already have issues with noise. I think once more lanes are added, the traffic is going to move much faster regardless of speed limits. And I think noise is going to be a significant issue for all residents through this section of that corridor.
Berwin or Nancy, do you want to address that? I know that's a major environmental element that is going to be studied in detail as a part of this process.
Yeah, we will be doing a noise study that includes taking noise measurements, running models. Will be based off of the design, off of the predicted traffic levels, and we'll identify what the future noise levels will be. And from there, mitigation opportunities will be reviewed and determined. So at this time, I don't know what the noise changes will be, but that is part of this environmental study that we are conducting.
Right, and there will be a noise report as a part of the draft environmental assessment that you can evaluate and continue to comment on as a part of the process as we continue to move this through. So thank you, Nancy, and also thank you, Randy. Amanda, do we have anybody else? Do we want to go back to our other participants?
Yeah, Christine Garza, are you able to unmute yourself now? It's not sounding like it quite yet, so we'll give her a little bit more again. Ariel, can you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you so much. So I would like to make a quick comment, and that could be a question also. It's about your traffic models, because in general, we know very much that every traffic model will always think that the traffic will increase over time. However, we also know that if we add lanes or new roads, the induced demand will make that more cars and more traffic will be created over time. So it will not solve any problem. And this is a very, very large investment that will be made over a very large amount of years. So have you thought about the community, how it will cut through our city in half, the city of Casa Grande, and how we don't have any other alternatives than the car? There is no investment in transit or in walkways, in sidewalks, in bike path. So we're completely stuck using these roads that will have more and more traffic as the industrial sites and the new employments are created. So have you thought about new plans to improve our situation and not just make this a nightmare where we have to depend on car and be stuck in traffic forever?
Hi, Ariel. Thank you for your question. We are focused on one particular improvement, and that's this east-west corridor. The city of Casa Grande will also be doing improvements as time goes on with other major corridors in the city, improving the city infrastructure as a whole. The plan that we are talking about, as we mentioned, is consistent with the city improvements. We're just here to focus on that particular improvement. Yes, if you build it, they will come. But one of the things that helps the community is all the investment, all of the opportunities brings additional work. Yes, it brings additional traffic, but that also brings basically additional progress to the area. This whole area grows, and this is part of what that growth has to include so we can make it safe, and also that we can make it so that they don't get overwhelmed on the streets. So it's not just the only solution, it's part of the solution. There are other enhancements that are proposed. You need to look at the city master plan, and you'll see some of the other improvements that are being done. It's just not being presented with this particular presentation.
Hey, Berwin, could you speak to any pedestrian improvements, that sort of thing?
As part of the corridor, if there's existing sidewalks, those are maintained. If there's not sidewalks, we usually don't incorporate them with the parkway. We don't add for those. We do make provisions for crosswalks and bike paths to cross the facility, and those will still be provided for. But it goes back to what the infrastructure is with the city, and then we match it. The same thing is true like in Maricopa. You'll see on the brand new section of the Sonoran Parkway, Maricopa wanted to have a sidewalk adjacent to it. So the right-of-way and their provisions included the sidewalk. We are including other areas where there is sidewalk within Maricopa. Where there is no sidewalk before, we don't have a provision to add sidewalk to it. that enhancement is not part of the project. We just keep the crossings in place.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Berwin. And thank you, Ariel, for the question. Appreciate it. Amanda, do we have any additional hands up?
Just going back to Christine Garza again, if you're not able to unmute yourself, I'm going to lower your hand, but feel free to ask a question in the Q&A, or you can, of course, use our survey as well.
All right. We're at about 7:10. Let's go ahead and look within the chat and see if there's a few questions we can address there. Again, we do have some time restraints this evening, but let's see how many questions in the Q&A we can get through as well, if you'd like to select one.
Jose just popped your hand up. We're going to unmute you real fast and then start working through the others. Can you?
Hello. I have my property is in between. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My property is in between Russell and Anderson, and we were very blessed to have our dream as in homesteading. In a little bit of rumors are going around that our the county might hinder a little bit of what we can do with our properties and what we cannot based on already what they have. Is this so? Based on the expansion of the roadway and all that stuff.
Jose, our community development department is going through a zoning code update, which I think is what you're referring to. I can't speak to where it's at in particular, but I do know it's open for public comment and there's a lengthy process involved, very similar to what we're doing today. If you would go to the county's website, I can certainly provide to you a link to be able to put in those comments about that particular project that's out for public comment as well.
All right. Thank you, Celeste. Thank you also, Jose, for the question. Appreciate that. Let's try to work through some, or do we have any other hands up before we move on to our chat?
Rebecca's asking, can you share some real world examples of the Arizona Parkway here in Arizona that we might be familiar with?
Well, actually, yes, we can say right in your neighbor, Maricopa, 2.5, 3 miles of the parkway is already constructed between 347 and Porter Road. So take a peek at that. Tucson is adding it on Ina Road as you go towards the resorts in Oracle. Those areas are awfully congested and very heavy residential areas. Again, they're using the parkway concept to improve the efficiency and to reduce the accidents at the major intersections. In Maricopa County, the Northwest Valley in particular has got several parkways being constructed as the development occurs there. Not in the old neighborhoods, but in the new areas that are being advanced north of I-10 in the area of State Route 303. So it's relatively new to Arizona, but it's quickly gaining speed in terms of its capacity and its safety enhancements for this type of a facility.
Thank you, Berwin. Amanda, can you read the next comment or question?
Will there be any improvements to 287 the Val Vista intersection to accommodate the increase in traffic?
Pinal Avenue, 287, we will be making improvements to that intersection. So we do have to address the likely left turn movements so they can continue from Val Vista to go to the north if they don't wish to go continue on Val Vista to I-10. So yes, each one of the intersections takes into account what the future traffic needs are, and those are the provisions that we make for our left turn lanes.
All right, next question, please.
Have there been studies on how many families and farmers will be displaced?
As part of the environmental document, one of the things we do look at is what will be the improvements and in terms of displacements. My understanding is that at this time, we are not recommending or looking at any total takes on any of the right of way. And if I'm wrong on that, Nancy's going to chime in. But the environmental assessment will take a look in terms of what the impacts are and what the displacements are. Part of the improvements that we are looking at is trying to maximize the use of the existing right of way and minimize the impacts to any of the parcels. There may be a acquisition of some of your right of way, but we're not taking the entire structure.
All right, thank you, Berwin. Next question.
Why is the speed limit set at 45 or 50? Shouldn't it be 65?
It's never fast enough for some people. And so 45 and 50 for the type of facility that we're building with curb and gutter and infrastructure like we're talking about, with the number of access points, the number of intersections. This is not a freeway, it's a parkway. And so it has to blend in with the other homes. It has to blend in with the other uses. And so it would not be reasonable to go to that speed for this type of a facility.
All right, thanks, Berwin. Next question, please.
Will the MCGH and Val Vista intersection be like the I-10 and SR 347 intersection? Will the I-11 highway crossing the MCGH, people traveling to Tucson can take this route south?
Sorry, Amanda.
Let's start with the first question, which is, will the MCGH and Val Vista intersection be like the I-10 and SR 347 intersection?
We are still working on what the MCGH and Val Vista intersection will look like. We are working with Casa Grande and their development plans for the future as to how that area is being developed. It will be at this time for the parkway an at grade, meaning no raised bridges going over anything. It'll be an at grade intersection. Okay, very similar, if you will, to the one that's there today, in the sense that it'll have a signal and provide opportunities to turn to any direction you wish to go. The intersection at I-10 and Val Vista will be a full new system interchange, complete with 4 ramps, with directional access to go to Tucson or to Phoenix or to Coolidge.
All right, thank you, Berwin. Next question.
Very good job and excellent opening regarding the safety impacts. Given the possible safety improvements,
Hey, Amanda, sorry to interrupt you. I think that was Ron's comment that he had a raised hand question. It sounds very similar.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and move on.
So we have some people that did submit multiple questions. It looks like B, you should be able to you should be able to ask a question in where you requested the question. But I'm going to unmute you because you do have your hand up as well.
Thank you. What is the impact on Trading Post Road for the proposed flood control district? And how does that impact the industrial parcels to the north side of the road, as well as the residential to the south?
Okay. Sorry, Dee, I was trying to find out where exactly Trading Post Road was. But I now see that Trading Post is the road in between the airport and the community that we're talking about to the south, the residential community, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So the improvements, we're not looking at any specific improvements with this corridor to Trading Post Road itself. We are looking at building a drainage channel to the north of the road to help with the flood control improvements associated with the airport, as well as the the flood flows that come in to, frankly, your community, and taking them away to the north of you, putting them into a channel and then conveying them to the MCGH channel. The intersection where you tie in with Anderson, Anderson Road will still have a signalized intersection to the MCGH. So you will still have full directional access at that location.
All right. Thanks, Berwin. Amanda, let's take maybe 5 more. We're running up on about 20 minutes over our posted time. I think let's try to get through about 5 more in the chat, and we'll go ahead and conclude from there.
So this question is, can you provide further clarification on the proposed limits or regulations for large commercial vehicles along the expanded highway route? Specifically, will there be designated truck lanes, weight restrictions, or time-based limitations to balance freight transportations with commuter traffic and road safety?
One of the things this corridor will incorporate is, as was mentioned earlier, we are connecting 347 with I-10. Along that route, there are industrial routes, industrial developments that do have large trucks, and so those trucks will be using the facility to take advantage the same way that commuters will, that residents do. It's a regional facility. It will not, with a 4-lane facility, we don't make a preference. I believe there's a preference in general with trucks that they're supposed to stay in the right lane, but we're not making it specific. There's no specific designation for trucks on the facility. However, that being said, the pavement and the design of the facility is being designed so it can accommodate the extra wear and tear that trucks are anticipated to provide.
Right. Thanks, Berwin. Amanda, on to the next one, please.
Looks like Christine was able to get her question into the Q&A. So we live in Saddleback Farm. Everyone from Maricopa talks about it benefiting. What are you planning to do for the residents along Maricopa Casa Grande Highway? Also, the increased traffic brings accidents, not enough patrolling this road.
Well, with respect to the improvements, yeah, we talk about the entire corridor in terms of, the improvement that it'll bring with the increased safety, also the increased capacity. When I don't understand the question in terms of one specific area over another. Mandy, can you read that over one more time?
We live in Saddleback Farm. Everyone from Maricopa talks about it benefiting them. What are you planning to do for the residents along Maricopa, along the MCGH?
So, with respect to the residents that are adjacent to this facility, understand that it's always been identified as a highway. And so we're continuing to keep it as a highway. Things that we are talking about in terms of the environmental study, it'll look at noise. We are not looking at changing its location. It does get widened as it's always been provided to be widened in the future. And so we're basically just fulfilling what the ultimate plans were. All facilities start out as a smaller facility because that's all one can afford to build. It's kind of like what you do with your own house. You start with a smaller house, you go to a bigger house. On our streets and roads, we start with a 2-lane facility till the volume builds up to a need for a 4-lane. We've come to the time where we need to build a 4-lane. And so that's what this study is looking at.
Right. Thanks, Berwin. Amanda, let's take 3 more and then.
So I think you've touched on this, but I think it's an important question. And it's being asked again. So thank you for your time tonight. How long will the project take to be completed?
I can take that one and explain. So right now the project is only under design. So only the funding that we have allocated is for the design process and this environmental clearance process. That's slated for completion in January of 2026. The construction, however, is not funded at the moment, nor is the land acquisition, easements, right of way, any of that. we're hoping to apply for grant opportunities to provide funding for that construction and that land acquisition for the future. Just keep in mind, I know there's been some comments in the chat about the 347 funding or the I-10 funding. None of that is a lesser priority because this project design is underway. Those are definitely at the top of the list for the agencies that are involved in the project. We are just providing another alternate, another east-west. We know that folks in both Casa Grande and Maricopa need options at the moment. They need options to Pinal. They need options to Florence Boulevard. We're trying to provide some regional connectivity for the entire area.
All right, thank you, Celeste. 2 more questions, Amanda, and then we'll wrap up.
What is the plan for the Anderson Road and MCGH intersection?
And I'm afraid we've answered that now 3 times. So we're not going to get any further other than the fact that it'll be a 4-lane facility. We'll put a signal there, and all of the movements will still be provided.
Thank you, Berwin, for the 3rd time. And Amanda, 1 last question, and we'll go ahead and close up here.
I live in unincorporated Casa Grande. What police will be dispatched for an accident? Can legislation be made to allow the quickest response times? If the accident is on the south side of Val Vista, it's CG police. If it's on the north side, it will be PCSO responding. With limited resources on the PCSO, can you see how response times will differ greatly?
Wow, is that a loaded question? The jurisdictional boundaries along this 20 miles is challenging, and I wish we had folks in the room that could answer that question, but I understand the thoughts and the feelings about being kind of an island, a county island within these surrounding cities. But I'll certainly pass that response off to our sheriff's department.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I did put a slide up here. Before we close, though, I'd like to just remind you that this presentation was recorded and it will be posted to the project website. I know we provided that link. We would like to encourage you to visit the website as well for additional information and to look out for future opportunities to engage with us. We have posted the web link in the chat for your convenience. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, please use the comment form, contact, or our team, or through the email address as well, the info east-west corridor at barnhartco.com. Finally, you have not already done so. I do still have the links up for the self-ID survey along with the QR codes for your convenience. You can scan those. We do encourage you to take those. Again, it just helps us understand who is engaging with us. We have placed those links as well in the chat. Really, most importantly, I just want to say thank you for your questions and comments this evening and for the time you've allotted to spend with us tonight. We did go over about a half hour, but I do want to let you know that if we did not get to your question or comment, we have documented all of those. We will include those as a part of our public record, as a part of this process. You can see those addressed in the public involvement summary after March 2nd. So if you still like to comment, you do have until March 2nd as a part of this process, and we encourage you to do so in the multiple ways. But if you have any additional interest or would like additional information, please visit the website. And again, we just want to say thank you for your time this evening, and we'll go ahead and close the meeting out. Again, thank you for the time. Bye-bye.